Alright, we're going to take a few minutes to kind of walk you through how I tend my Hitzer 503 gravity-fed coal stove. Just want to put a point out there in the beginning that every coal stove setup is different. Every stove model, every chimney, the draft it pulls, even the type of coal that you're burning, even if you have the same setup as this right here, the same chimney and a different type of coal, it's going to burn slightly different. So what I'm going to show you here is how I tend it. It's going to be different for each different user out there of coal and even with this stove. So take this as a informative video. If you can take some tips from this, great. If this benefits you at all, great. But there are definitely more than one way to tend or skin a cat, as they may say, when it comes to coal stoves. So unlike wood stoves are pretty user friendly. You can kind of jump right in and kind of have a good understanding and getting consistent burns with wood quite often, quite easily. Coal stove, I'll say it's easier in the long run, but there's a learning curve. I'll say it took me about 3-4 weeks or so to kind of understand my stove, my setup. And also, again, it does vary. When I get a new batch of coal from a different company, I may have to adjust some of the parameters that I use when I'm burning and cleaning. So anyway, that being said, bear with me as we kind of walk through this video on how to tend a Hitzer 503 gravity-fed coal stove. Okay, first tip is when you're going to start opening up the doors and taking out the ash, turn the fan off. You don't want that fan, which is coming through the jacketed design of this stove, blowing any coal dust anywhere else in your house. It's fairly clean if you do it this way. Tip number 2 is I always leave the ash from the last shakedown in the pan. This way, there's no burning embers inside the ash pan, so you can go dump it outside wherever you may choose to dump it and not really worry about a hot ember catching something on fire. You should still dump it either outside or not near combustible items, or what I do is I have a big galvanized garbage can out here attached to a hand truck that I'll just dump this all into. Again, it's outside, it's still safe, the can's not combustible, but there's one more step to reduce the likelihood of burning down your house accidentally. Just so you're tracking, this is where I dump mine outside this French door into a screened porch, and there's my galvanized can on hand truck. It makes it easy to get the coal dust out to a location away from the house. Okay, the tray is now empty. One thing to note, if you're pulling your tray out, there's a lot of pieces of unburnt coal inside the tray. That means you're shaking too hard. You want to shake down and get a lot of the dust out of the fire bed, but you also want to overshake to where you're wasting usable coal into your ashtray. So if you notice that, maybe next time try shaking down a little bit less. So the tray can go back in. My Hitzer is one of the newer ones with this damper up here. I forgot to open it before, but I always open that up before I open the bottom. Just that helps the draft increase quite a bit to help pull any dust while opening the tray. Help that get out the chimney. Okay. All right, continuing on. Hitzer 503, you have to keep the door open when you shake it down. So you have your shaker handle, put that on. I prefer to go like 6 or 7 shakes each side. You don't want to shake out one side too much to where that's all been brought down. You shake this side out, then you're getting hot coals from that side to come over. So I prefer to do about 6 or 7 shakes, hard shakes, probably between the 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock position. No further, else you may risk getting the shaker stuck. So that's how I do it. And left side. Not sure if you can see from that angle, but there are some. The goal is to have embers come down in 4 rows total, 2 rows for each side of each shaker. So there's fingers here and fingers here. If you have some good embers coming down there, that means you've cleaned out the dust and you should have a good hot coal bed again. So what I'm seeing is I have good embers in the middle, some on the outside. Here's the next tip and trick I'll show you. I've created this 1-inch metal rod. Didn't create the rod, but here's the far end, which I'll show you. I'll insert above the shaker itself, and here's the rest of the length of this rod. It's got a handle in the end. It's about 2.5 to 3 foot long. I'll show you what I do with this to kind of get in there and fine tune the actual getting more dust out of there without shaking down much more. So I'll slide this in the gap right above where the shaker is. It's a pretty big gap, and just slide this down along the length until you see the hot embers come down along the full length. Okay, so now the outside is good. The right side, switch over to the left side. And if it slides in and out real easy, that's probably meaning you're in a full, very fine ash. You'll start to feel resistance when you get rid of that fine ash and get down to some actual unburnt coal or burning coal. Okay, side's done now as well. That stick will be very hot, so be very careful. Keep your gloves on when using that if you choose. If you look inside there, you can see we have glowing from pretty much both sides there. Okay, at this point, your shakedown is complete. You turn the fan back on. I run the stove usually around that 400 degree mark. I have a little, stove burn indicator magnet right above the door here. Okay, the shakedown is finished, so our damper is still open, and we're going to go ahead and take the lid off here. Inside there is a bunch of coal in there ready. We probably won't have enough for one shuttle. Okay, another tip. I have this rake right here, wood stove or fireplace rake. I use this to push the coal to the back of the hopper. Back there, that kind of allows me to fill it up a little more. The more this hopper is filled, the better it burns, the more coal that will warm up the temperature. So as this thing burns, it'll just naturally fall down there, hence the gravity-fed hopper system. Last tip here is you want to make sure the surface here inside here is clean. I use the back of my gloves to kind of wipe out any pieces of coal that fell in there from your dump. There's other methods to clean that, but I use the back of my glove to keep that clean. Again, you want to make sure this gasket, which is underneath this piece of metal, has a good clean surface to seal against. This way it enables the stove to work properly and get the draft. Okay, so usually I let my stove run for 24 hours between fills. Today I only did about 16 hours or so. That's why I didn't take as much coal, and the bed is already looking good. So we're going to go ahead and close this damper all the way, and that should be a good burn temperature. It's very cold and windy out today, so I have a very strong draft. So recovery time, usually I have this bottom door open for a little longer and this top open to help recover the coal bed a little bit, and then I'll shut it down. But for me, I have this light that's next to my fireplace, that's standalone light above there. That's my warning light. I never walk away from this stove with anything open without leaving this light on. So this light's on, that means the stove is still, open. That's my reminder. I recommend, if you have a timer on your phone, like never leave your stove open and walk away, because you may forget it, and then you may have a very major problem on your hands as far as the stove melting, or even worse yet, a house fire. So just a point of safety there. This video got longer than I wanted to, but just so you know how I burn again, every setting is different. I usually have these bottom holes open just to where it becomes an oval. So that's kind of where I burn mine. I usually maintain about a 400 degree temperature at this location of the stove. So I'm going to have a couple more videos out there of why I burn coal over wood, and also a more general overview of the Hitzer 503 coal stove. So look for those if you're interested.